Although I'm interested in the archaeology of the entire prehistory of North America, most of the projectile point styles that I flintknap are from the Midwestern United States. It is fun now and then to leave my comfort zone, both of what I'm used to making and where my archaeological knowledge lies, and explore knapping something from outside the Midwest. The Great Basin is a geographic area with many interesting archaeological sites and materials, and is very different environmentally from the Midwest. In this video, I am flintknapping an Elko corner notch point, one of the most distinctive styles from this region. The Great Basin covers an area encompassing most of Nevada, much of Utah and Oregon, and parts of Idaho, Wyoming, and California. This temperate desert area has a special drainage system known as an endorheic drainage system. An endorheic drainage basin retains water and does not drain into external bodies of water, such as lakes and oceans. Instead, the drainages here converge into lakes and swamps that equilibrate through evaporation. This evaporative nature often causes these water bodies to be seasonal. The Great Basin is a product of the geological activity from the Sierra Nevada and Cascade Mountains. Although much of this area is desert, dominated by sagebrush and shade scale, the extreme contrast in elevation between basin floors and mountains creates alpine and forest environments as well. In general, the weather in the Great Basin consists of hot, dry summers and snowy winters. Elko corner notch points are small to medium-sized projectile points with triangular-shaped blades. They have narrow corner notches and a flat to elliptical cross-section. The notches on these points create barbs which terminate in sharp points. The bases of these points are most commonly concave, but are fairly variable and can be straight or slightly convex as well. The pressure flaking on these points is commonly random, but is occasionally done with a parallel oblique pattern. Often, the final pass of pressure flaking was done to create fine serrations, leaving a brutally sharp edge. There are several other types of Elko points, including Elko eared, Elko contracting stem, and Elko side notched. In some areas of the Great Basin, these styles co-occur, while in other areas they do not overlap in their sequence. The Elko series of projectile points is dated to a range of 1200 BCE to 600 CE as part of the James Creek phase of the Great Basin's Archaic period. I'm flintknapping this Elko point from a piece of obsidian. Elko points were commonly made from obsidian, but also chert, jasper, rhyolite, quartzite, etc. Within the Great Basin, there are two distinctive lithic landscapes. An obsidian rim encircles the Intermountain West, in Idaho, southeastern Oregon, western Nevada, southeastern California, southern Nevada, and western Utah. Within this obsidian rim, projectile points were most commonly napped from obsidian, anywhere from 100% obsidian usage down to 20%. The chert core is restricted to central and northeastern Nevada, within the center of the Great Basin. This chert core contains less than 2% of all known obsidian sources in the Great Basin, but contains a variety of other lithic materials. The greatest amount of obsidian usage for manufacturing projectile points in this region is at about 20%, and in some cases goes down to about 0%. Arid environments like the Great Basin have little soil formation. As such, archaeological materials are often where they were left on the ground surface without soil deposits covering them. For archaeologists, this makes the collection of artifacts easier, but makes chronology and observing change over time within the archaeological record difficult. However, caves and rock shelters provide an opportunity for deeply stratified archaeological deposits, making them some of the most informationally valuable sites in the Great Basin. The Gatecliff Rock Shelter is by far the most famous of these, with sediment from fast-flowing floodwater creating deep deposits. At Gatecliff, there are more than 10 meters of stratified deposits with 16 cultural horizons present. This rock shelter was first excavated in the 1970s, with an estimated 5,000 person-days of work being conducted and roughly 600 cubic meters of the deposit being removed. Plant remains were recovered here, stretching back hundreds of years, which was used to reconstruct how the environment here changed over time. This floral assemblage also documents the earliest use of pinyon pine nuts by humans in the New World. At Gatecliff, over 400 projectile points were recovered in a tight stratigraphic sequence, which was very helpful in building a chronology. Other archaeological materials recovered at Gatecliff Rock Shelter include ceramics, basketry, marine shell beads, groundstone tools, and floral and faunal remains. Note that when I'm notching this tool, I'm using my buffalo rib pressure flaker rather than my indirect percussion tool. Because obsidian is a volcanic glass, it is significantly more brittle than chert and other non-volcanic lithic materials. The force generated from my indirect percussion tool may be too much for what's needed, especially since I'm used to working obsidian less than other materials. While this brittleness may seem like a drawback, making the material weaker, it also has advantages as well. The brittleness of obsidian makes manufacturing tools easier, and it's a more consistent material to work compared to chert and other materials. Obsidian's real advantage that comes with being brittle is its edge. Obsidian is so sharp that flakes of it can have an edge only a few molecules thick. This is much finer than any chert or even modern steel scalpels, making obsidian the sharpest material known to man. Reproduction Elko points have been used in multiple experimental archaeology studies. One of the more impactful of these studies tested projectile point breakage patterns. 39 Elko points were flint-knapped from obsidian for use in this study and were very closely matched in size. 9 of these were damaged prior to completion, leaving 30 to be tested as projectiles. These were hafted into hardwood foreshafts and held in place with pine pitch and elk sinew. Foreshafts were preserved at several Great Basin sites, and the ones produced in this study were modeled after those examples recovered in Danger Cave, Swallow Shelter, and NC Cave. These foreshafts were put on at ladle darts and thrown into a variety of materials, including sand, gravel, cinders, loose bark, dirt, sod, and wood. 70% of these projectile points suffered damage on the first throw, while the rest were thrown multiple times before breaking. Bending, shearing, and crushing forces created the breaks on the Elko projectile points, although bending was the most common and largely resulted in points breaking laterally. Breaking at the half, where the notches were narrowest and meet the body of the point, was fairly common and the result of bending. Shearing motions is what caused most of the barbs on the projectile points to break. Finally, crushing resulted in breaking on the distal ends or margins, creating overlapping series of deeply rippling flake scars. This study is useful because it provides data on how points break from being used differs from manufacturing breaks and other types of damage, resulting in clearer interpretations of the archaeological record. This also shows how durable projectile points were and can give archaeologists a rough estimate on how often projectile tips needed to be replaced.